A gruesome skull wound. A pharaoh who had his brains bashed out of his skull like an eggshell. That's what researchers found when they examined the mummified remains of this ancient Egyptian king. But the story behind how he died is much more than just a botched execution. It involves a power struggle, a civil war, and a battle for the throne that saw the toppling of one of Egypt's most powerful dynasties. This is the story of the pharaoh who died in the most horrifying way. It's me, and you're watching this channel. Join me today as we look at the life and death of Pharaoh Seqenenre Tao, the last king of the 13th dynasty and the penultimate pharaoh of the Middle Kingdom. Our story begins in Thebes, where Seqenenre Tao was born into royalty around 1800 BCE. He was the son of Pharaoh Amenhotep IV and his wife, Queen Nefru. His father's reign would be a prosperous one, marked by peace and stability. So it seemed that Seqenenre Tao was destined for a peaceful reign as well. And to prepare him for the role, he received the standard royal education, learning everything from hunting to math to the skills needed to govern a nation. In fact, it was during his father's reign that he began his formal training and was appointed viceroy of Thebes. However, upon his father's death, things didn't go according to plan. Instead of inheriting the throne, Seqenenre Tao was passed over in favor of his older brother, Amenhotep IV. Fortunately for Seqenenre Tao, though, he didn't have to wait long to inherit the throne, because his older brother's reign would be a short one, lasting only 6 years. After Amenhotep V's death, Seqenenre Tao took the throne and became the new pharaoh. But unfortunately for Seqenenre, while his father and brother had enjoyed relatively stable reigns, this wouldn't be the case for him. During his first few years in office, he had to deal with rebellions and incursions from Nubia. However, he would successfully put down these rebellions and restore order to the kingdom. In fact, he would even launch a campaign against the Hyksos people in the eastern desert. Then there were the intrigues and rebellions from within the kingdom itself, including a usurper named Samti, who pretended to be the rightful heir to the throne. Although Seqenenre Tao defeated this pretender, it seems that the constant warfare weakened the kingdom. In addition to this, the kingdom was suffering from a severe drought, which caused crop failures and food shortages. The populace grew tired of paying taxes, and soon the whole country was on the verge of collapse. It seemed that Seqenenre Tao was destined to go down in history as one of the worst pharaohs to ever rule Egypt. So to try to fix his failing kingdom, he decided to marry the daughter of one of his most powerful vassals, in hopes that this would bring him more support. He sent a delegation to her father's court to ask for her hand in marriage. But when the messengers arrived, they were met with hostility. In fact, her father, Bemi, not only refused to give his daughter's hand in marriage to the pharaoh, but also declared independence from the crown and began amassing an army to conquer all of Egypt. Soon, he began invading the northern parts of the kingdom, defeating Seqenenre Tao's forces and taking cities such as Akhmim and Thebes. With his capital under siege and his kingdom crumbling apart, it seemed as if Seqenenre Tao was a goner. Yet the beleaguered pharaoh managed to escape Thebes and flee to the south. There he gathered some allies and loyal troops and prepared to make a counterattack against Bemi. In the end, the two armies met in battle somewhere in Upper Egypt, but neither side could claim a decisive victory. So they agreed to meet again the following day to continue fighting. But overnight, something interesting happened. While the two armies were separated, the camp of Bemi was attacked, and nearly every single soldier in the camp was killed, leaving their leader with no army and no choice but to surrender. In fact, he didn't even get to surrender. He was captured along with many of his nobles and taken before Seqenenre Tao. The pharaoh didn't show any mercy and ordered that Bemi and his sons be put to death right away. Some sources say that Seqenenre Tao also executed anyone who surrendered, but that detail isn't confirmed by the archaeological record. After dealing with his enemies, Seqenenre Tao returned to Thebes and began restoring the city, which had suffered much damage during the siege. Unfortunately, though, his good mood wouldn't last very long. Just a couple of years after defeating Bemi, he got word that another vassal was rising in arms, this time in the northern part of his kingdom. The man's name was Amenhotep, and he was both a priest and a member of the royal family. You see, he actually used to be the vizier, or a prime minister, of Egypt, but he lost his job after siding with Bemi during the Civil War. Now he was gathering soldiers to try to take the throne for himself. And despite being old enough to be Seqenenre Tao's father, the pharaoh felt confident enough in his abilities to face him in battle. Upon hearing this news, Seqenenre Tao assembled his army and marched north to confront the traitorous priest. The two armies eventually met on the banks of the River Nile near the city of Memphis. The battle was fierce and lasted for several hours, but in the end, Seqenenre Tao and his men emerged victorious. Many of Khnamhotep's followers were executed, but the wily old noble managed to escape across the Nile. However, Seqenenre Tao wasn't done with him yet. He pursued Khnamhotep south and cornered him in the temple of the moon god Khan. Once again, the aging noble escaped and fled to the Theban region in the south, where he had apparently spent some time earlier in his life. There, he built a fortress and tried to hold it against the pursuing pharaoh. But after about 5 months, Seqenenre Tao managed to capture the city. Again, Khnamhotep managed to escape execution by faking his own death. But the canny pharaoh was unfooled and ordered his guards to dig up the grave and execute the traitor anyway. Unfortunately for Seqenenre Tao, the back-to-back campaigns had drained his treasury and exhausted his people. They weren't happy that their pharaoh had engaged in so much warfare, and the constant fighting had disrupted the economy and caused food shortages. But instead of trying to pacify his people, Seqenenre Tao continued to build more fortifications throughout Egypt and raise taxes to pay for them. The populace was fed up, and in the end, it would be the common folk who struck the fatal blow to the once great dynasty. In the end, Seqenenre Tao would die in battle, but the exact circumstances surrounding his death are still a bit unclear. You see, Seqenenre Tao would go down in history as the last king of the 13th dynasty, but not because he was killed. In the civil wars that plagued his reign, he actually managed to survive those conflicts. Instead, he was killed during a later conflict when Egypt came under the control of the 14th dynasty. He decided to marry the daughter of a local chieftain named Hatshepsut in an attempt to secure his northern border. But since she was already married, he had to engage in a war with her husband to make it happen. In the end, he was killed during the battle, and his head was cut off and presented to his enemies as a trophy. However, exactly who killed him is still up for debate. According to Manetho, the Egyptian historian, he was killed by the ruler of Syria, but other historians attribute his death to the Nubian king Kusta, who was married to the woman the pharaoh wanted to marry. Whatever the truth, Seqenenre Tao was the last male heir of the 13th dynasty, and when he died, his young daughter, Sobin Pharaoh, inherited the throne, becoming the first and only female pharaoh of the 13th dynasty. She would rule for about 4 years until Egypt was conquered by the 14th dynasty, and the Middle Kingdom came to an end. But now, I want to hear from you. What do you think happened to Seqenenre Tao's skull? Was it really bashed open like an egg? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow for more. Thanks for watching. See you next time.